The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
We've had so much Trump stuff all week, and we are going to take calls after the break, that I want to do a non-Trump story right now for you. You might remember the story of bigoted, despicable, rancid, anti-gay scofflaw Kentucky County Clerk Kim Davis, who refused to issue marriage licenses to same-sex couples in Rowan County, Kentucky last year, after the Supreme Court decision banning bans on same-sex marriage at the state level. There are 4 couples, 2 same-sex couples and 2 straight couples, that sued Kim Davis as a result of her actions, and she has lost her legal battle to be a bigot. And here's the sweet, sweet irony of it, or justice, call it what you want. Kim Davis might actually have to pay the legal fees and costs of her opponents, which are $233,058. Ultimately, the lawsuit was resolved after the Kentucky Republican governor changed the state law to eliminate the need of clerks to even authorize licenses. So there was this thing where, for whatever reason, the clerk had to authorize marriage licenses. And the Kentucky Republican governor said, you know, this is really kind of an S storm, if you know what I mean. Let's just change the law so that Kim Davis is no longer even in the position of being the decider about these marriage licenses. However, as for her own costs, Davis has had a pretty easy ride. That anti-LGBT Liberty Council did the legal work for her for free. Great for her. But she may actually have to pay up now, because the 4 couples who sued her are appealing to U.S. District Court Judge David Bunning to seek an order allowing them to recoup the $233,058 in legal fees and costs. Now, you might say, well, hold on. She was acting in her capacity as Rowan County Clerk at the time. Maybe Rowan County Clerk should pay the costs. And they said, no. She was directed to issue marriage licenses, and she was acting on her own behalf, and we are not going to cover these costs. Now, Liberty Counsel is still defending her for free. They are fighting the order on the grounds that since she didn't really lose the case, she shouldn't have to pay the cost. And that is technically true, because the lawsuit was done. And then the Republican governor said, you know what? The county clerk no longer has to sign marriage licenses. So now these couples can go and get the marriage licenses without Kim Davis's signature on them. And the Liberty Counsel is saying, because the law was changed, she doesn't owe anybody any money. Of course, that doesn't change the fact that at the time of the lawsuit, that wasn't the law, and legal costs were incurred by the 4 plaintiffs. All she has to do, Pat, is put up a website, and the anti-gay haters are going to give her money. You do a little GoFundMe campaign for hate, like that crazy anti-gay pizza restaurant. Next thing you know, she'll have $233,000.
And the crazy part of the story is she was almost treated like a martyr by conservatives like Mike Huckabee, who would put her out there in his campaign rallies.
Kim Davis is exactly the reason why a certain contingent of conservatives is just not taken seriously in America. She's the textbook definition of a hypocrite. She says, oh, traditional values, biblical values. She's been married 4 times to 3 different men, cheated on husband number 1 with husband number 3, yet morality made it so she just couldn't issue a license for marriage to a same-sex couple. She won't even be an asterisk, but rather a coffee stain on the history of LGBT rights in the United States, and it comes down to her delusions of grandeur. Your job, Kim, isn't to figure out whether your particular God's morality is consistent with a Supreme Court decision. It's to hand out marriage licenses and collect your paycheck. And after the Republican governor's decision to change the law, her job is not even any longer to hand out marriage licenses. I hope that she ends up having to pay, and to pay big. Little silver lining in what's been a week of pretty bad news today on Veterans Day. I'm thinking about our veterans and our active duty military and our reserve military today, because we have a president-elect now that clearly is not a friend to veterans. We have seen that time and again. I am sure that after the break, when we take your phone calls at 617-830-4750, we will hear from callers, at least some of whom are concerned with the upcoming actions of President-to-be Donald Trump. Glad you're with us today.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Today's new member of the day is Alexandros Plakidas Tasios. I hope I didn't butcher that too badly. Alexandros, thank you so much for being a David Pakman Show member. davidpakman.com/membership is the place to sign up. And if we have learned anything from this week's election results, it is that we need strong, independent, non-corporate media. Look at where corporate media got us in 2016. davidpakman.com/membership, and of course, davidpakman.com/calendar17 to get your free 2017 David Pakman Show calendar with your membership. I would love to send these things out for free with memberships all day long. That would be fantastic. We are taking calls at 617-830-4750, and we will take name and town from our callers and then hear what it is that you are talking about. We just want to make sure that that volume level for them is up. Name and town. Where are you calling from?
Hi, my name is Russell. I'm from California.
What's going on, Russell?
Hey, Dave. I just want to say I'm a huge fan of yours, by the way. Great job at what you're doing.
Thank you.
You know, just after last night, I'm just disappointed. And I guess my question to you is the large majority of America really as unintelligent or all right with, I don't know, all right with what's going on? I mean, is the large majority of America really this unintelligent?
Well, so the answer is yes, unfortunately. We can't just blame stupid people for what happened in this election. And I made that really clear on my after-election show, where we have to put blame where blame should be. And a lot of that is on the Democratic National Committee, which pre-decided that Hillary Clinton was the nominee. Hillary Clinton, a hugely flawed nominee, albeit a very qualified nominee. And we can't just say stupid people voted Trump. Now, as far as the Trump electorate, yes, there are low information voters that voted for Trump. They think this is some amazing victory. They think we're going to win again. It's going to be fantastic. It's going to be tremendous, this whole thing. We can't really reach them. But the problem is that there are also other people who, for example, said, I just want to shock the system. And the way to shock it is by voting for Donald Trump. They didn't necessarily think Trump was a smart guy or a great guy. There were other people also. Republicans who didn't particularly like Trump, but they voted for Trump because they didn't want Hillary Clinton selecting Supreme Court justices, for example. So I think it's a combination of stuff.
Okay. Yes. Yeah. I see that. And just a quick side question, I guess, would be: does that also mean that there are that many bigoted and I would have to say racist people in this country as well? There
are. Yeah. I mean, the polls showed, as you remember, Rachel, that there were disproportionately more Trump supporters than supporters of other candidates who believed that black people were inherently lazy because they were black and these types of things. I think the numbers bear that out, don't they? That the Trump coalesced that group.
Yeah, he definitely did. He definitely brought out a really, really, really large support for that.
All right. Thank you so much for the call. Really, really appreciate it. We will continue to see what is the future of America after this election. 617-830-4750 is the number. Name and town. We are taking post-election calls, getting your thoughts. Who's on with me next?
Hello?
Hey, name and town. Where are you calling from?
Sure. I'm Christian. I'm from Exeter, New Hampshire.
Cool. What's on your mind today?
So I've been talking with a lot of my teachers. I'm currently in high school. And, you know, a lot of them have been blaming the voters that they didn't get out to vote.
Right.
And in my mind, as an avid Bernie supporter, I'm thinking, well, you know, maybe Bernie would have been a better general election candidate. But they say, you know, the Republicans would have painted him as a socialist. And I was wondering how, I guess, negative would have that description been. I mean, I think Kyle Kulinski from Secular Talk talked a little bit about it, how basically Bernie touts himself as a socialist.
Right.
And he didn't necessarily see that being too negative, but I was wondering what your take was on it.
I tend to agree with that. And there's sort of two thoughts on that. Number one, Americans are the least negative they've been to the term socialist since we've basically done polling on that. So socialist has the least negative status in American history since we've sort of been looking at that title. Number two, Bernie Sanders had a very good way of explaining, I'm talking about democratic socialism. We still have private business. We still have all of these things that are capitalist economic part of the capitalist apparatus. But I believe everybody should have health care regardless of whether they can afford it or not. I believe that everybody should have access to education whether or not they can afford or want to take hundreds of thousands of loans to go to a good school. So I agree with Kyle that not only is the socialist label the least bad it's been for a very long time, Bernie Sanders was not scared of that. And he was able to say, listen, I'm not a communist. I'm a democratic socialist. And here's what that means.
Exactly.
Now, as far as the difference, yesterday, Pat and Rachel, when we were looking at the results of this election, we sort of realized that in many of these states where Trump won, that they were not states historically that the Republican wins. Wisconsin is a really good example. It was a pretty small margin, right? I mean, Wisconsin, we're talking about a 1 percentage point margin. So if even a small portion of the electorate went Trump or stayed home because of the FBI email stuff, for example, the other areas in which Hillary Clinton was a controversial and arguably flawed candidate, then Bernie Sanders may have been able to take that state. So I think that there is a lot to that, but we'll never ultimately know for sure, will we?
No, well, I mean, we'll never know for sure, but I also feel like the bigger issue here is that I think and I voted for him. I'm very ideologically aligned with him, but I really feel like he did not come out with enough support for Hillary Clinton. I feel like he could have done a lot more to kind of revolutionize all of the Bernie or bust people, and maybe the margins would have been a little bit smaller.
That's a fair point, Pat.
Well, you saw this race was really lost by Hillary Clinton in the Rust Belt, right?
Yeah.
Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin. And you'd have to think that Bernie Sanders would have turned out more union support. And a lot of people voted against Hillary Clinton because they saw NAFTA and the extension of Bill Clinton's policies to continue. And I don't think we would have saw that under Bernie.
You're right in that had she won Pennsylvania, and, Ohio is part of that too, and then you've got Wisconsin, and then you see, everything else, Iowa as well. Florida, where she lost, would have basically become irrelevant, at least electorally. So I think there's a lot to that. Thanks so much for the call. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
All right. 617-830-4750. Hearing from people, a lot of different thoughts about the election, just a lot of different things on people's minds. Who's on the phone with me now? What's your name and where are you calling from?
Hi, David. It's Luis from Los Angeles, California.
Yeah.
My question to you, well, technically, it's two of them. I'm a big fan of also you and of Secular Talk with Kyle. And Kyle just put a tweet saying Donald Trump had a 63% unfavorable during the general election. So one of my first questions is, could we ever trust polls again in the next presidency to come?
Well, I think that, but let's take that first, right? So there's sort of a couple different issues here. It doesn't necessarily follow that a 63% unfavorable polling for Donald Trump was wrong because he won. Remember that when it comes to the popular vote, this is no mandate for Donald Trump, number one. And number two, there are many Republicans we know who hold an unfavorable view of Donald Trump, but voted for him because they don't want Hillary Clinton selecting 3 to 4 Supreme Court justices because they believe Hillary Clinton will do X, Y, or Z thing that they don't like. So just because Donald Trump won this election electorally doesn't mean that 63% of the electorate does not have an unfavorable opinion of Donald Trump. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Makes sense.
What was your other question?
Okay. My other question is, for me, as being, I'm currently a green card holder. I'm a resident, so I'm doing it technically the right way. This is what Trump wants. He wants more people like me to come into the country legally.
Right, and you're working here legally, I'm sure, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
yes.
not like his wife, who was here and working illegally. Yeah, go ahead.
Exactly.
Yep.
So, so obviously, I have some suspicion. Hopefully, I'm already. I've been a resident for 5 years, and I'm about to apply for my citizenship. Hopefully, like any months from now, hopefully get my papers in.
Yeah.
But as I mentioned, currently living in LA, I'm obviously very worried for many of the illegal immigrants working right here today.
Yep.
Is it realistic, in your opinion, on what he promised on deporting 11 million, which, as he said, he believes it's even more than 11 million?
Yeah, he thinks it could be 30 million. No, I don't think it's realistic.
Million, yeah.
I don't think it's realistic. I mean, remember, deportations are up under President Obama relative to George W. Bush. And what I believe Trump will ultimately do on immigration, and if Pat or Rachel disagree, by all means, let me know. I think we're going to see basically a continuation of the Obama policy. The wall won't happen, but we might see fencing put up in some parts so that on paper he can kind of claim victory on it. But of course, Mexico's not going to pay for it. And I think we will see an attempt to do I think you will see at the state level more Arizona type laws passed where you can be asked for papers. But I don't think we're going to see anything close to what Trump has promised on this. What do you think, Rachel?
Ask for papers? What do you mean by that?
Well, so in a lot of states, you can't, in a normal interaction with police can't also inquire about your immigration status. And I think you could see it at the state level,
exactly.
Laws change so that police, even if it's just, a traffic stop, for example, they could demand proof of citizenship. And I think you could see some of those at the state level. What do you think?
I also kind of think he's going to take more of a hard line into preventing more immigration as opposed to focusing on deportation, even though that's what he said. That's what I think.
And a lot of that will come, Pat, probably from trying to cut down on asylum and refugee status applications. Those are going to be the more likely mechanisms.
Right. I think the wall is just not feasible. And I think even he is starting to back off of it now. But it'll be interesting. I'm sure deportations will go up. But unlike Obama, he'll actually get the so-called credit for it.
Yeah.
And people will actually recognize that deportations are going up.
Great question. I really appreciate the call.
Thank you so much, David.
617-830-4750 is the number. We are taking calls on any topic that you want to discuss. Of course, heavily focused on the election because we did have those results this week. Who's on with me next? Just tell us your name and where you're calling from.
My name is Jacob. I'm from Arkansas.
All right, Jacob, what's going on?
Yeah, I'm wondering, with the win for Donald Trump, what does that say for the American democracy for the future? I'm wondering what the America will look like in about 4 years.
Well, so this is an interesting question because we have 4 years now of President-elect Donald Trump, and we're sort of wondering how much of what Obama did is Trump going to undo? What are we going to see in terms of free speech in the Constitution? What are we going to see happen to the Supreme Court, which will have multi-generational impact? At the same time, we continue to recognize that the president does not have absolute power, something Trump has been used to having as CEO of his organization. You don't have absolute power as the president, and that could see him be significantly frustrated. And in addition to that, the country keeps changing, and demographically, the country is going in a direction that does not help candidates like Trump. So I think we are going to see an interesting 4 years in that although the country electorally has moved quite significantly to the left, particularly on social issues, as well as on some issues of taxation and the connection between religion and state, we are also going to now see one of the most radical administrations in terms of what Donald Trump would like to do. And the question mark for me, Rachel, is what will Trump be able to do, which is not going to match what it is that he has promised or suggested during the campaign?
Well, I'm really not sure. I feel like he's going to default a lot to Mike Pence, who is a lot more traditionally conservative than he is. And I think
far more dangerous.
Oh, and far more dangerous. And I think that that's something interesting to remember is that Trump wasn't necessarily driven by a far right ideology. He was kind of on the bizarre outskirts of that. So I think a lot of it is going to be left up to Mike Pence.
The scariest thing to me, Pat, and we're going to be doing a special on the alt-right that segment producer Noah Ferguson has been working on with me, is the emboldening of certain elements of society. And I am, as I've said before, as concerned about that, Jacob, as I am about the actual Trump policies. Are you worried about that, Pat?
Right. It's going to legitimize the whole alt-right movement in this country. I would agree with Rachel. I think for the most part, he's going to delegate out responsibility. We say he doesn't have absolute power, but he's going to have both houses of Congress and the Supreme Court on his side. So that's pretty much as close as you can get.
Yeah, we also have to remember, if we're thinking about this kind of like a big business, for instance, if someone is coming in who doesn't have a lot of experience and has a temper, there are going to be people in place, and there are some intelligent, smart Republicans who are going to push back on what he's doing.
We'd better hope so. We better hope so. Jacob, thanks so much for the call. I really appreciate it. We'll take one or two more calls. 617-830-4750 is the number. We are taking all questions and comments. Who's on the phone with me next, and where are you calling from?
I am Noah, and I'm living in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania.
All right, Noah, what's on your mind today?
I just wanted to let you know that I've been watching you for many years now,
Thank you.
I voted for Donald Trump. I've been watching you for a really long time, and I watch all different types of independent media, and I just wanted to thank you for everything you've done. And I always take your opinion into account on practically everything, and I really respect you guys as individuals. And I'll definitely continue to watch you regardless of how my views shift. And I really just wanted to thank you for all that.
Well, thank you. I mean, I'm curious, on what issue made you decide to vote for Donald Trump?
Like it was really more of like the whole politically incorrect, like alternative right viewpoint.
Wow.
Kind of that I was into. I was at the beginning. This sounds really stupid. I'm only 18. I go to the University of Pennsylvania.
Yeah.
And I supported Bernie Sanders at the beginning of this whole thing. And
Really?
I actually ended up voting for Donald Trump. Yeah, and it's really a 180 turnaround, and I don't know. It's really just, I really like the movement. I really wanted an outsider just to shake things up and such.
And what exactly do you hope Trump will do now that would be something you would say, oh, that was a good policy thing he did?
I'm definitely looking forward to seeing what he does in the Middle East. And
but what could he do that you would say that's the right thing? I mean, it sounds like, I mean, I'm just as curious as you, like, what the hell is he going to do in the Middle East?
Yeah.
But what would you like to see him do, or you would say, wow, that's what I voted for, and I'm glad we got it?
Believe it or not, I'm not really a big fan of like the whole Mexican immigration and such, and all the illegal immigration. So I am pretty, curious, skeptical, but excited to see if he'll actually, build the wall, which I've been looking forward to for a while.
Yeah. Now, did you know that there's a net outflow of Mexican immigrants? Like, there's more people leaving the U.S. to go to Mexico than coming in from Mexico. Was that something you were aware of?
Not personally. I mean, right when we hang up, I will look at the statistic.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, it's too late, even if factually.
Yeah, no, listen, we're not. Pennsylvania is red, and that's it.
Yeah.
I'm just curious because, you're expressing this idea where you like the energy and the movement and you have curiosity, but I'm wondering, what is it exactly policy-wise that you hope Trump will achieve? And, the wall isn't getting built. There might be some fencing put up in some parts, and Mexican immigration really mathematically is becoming a smaller and smaller problem with this net outflow. So it's interesting.
Yeah. What about the politically incorrect movement energized you? I'm really curious.
It's I mean, as awful as it may, and like I have expressed, like I am very moderate. Like I have listened to many sides of the argument, been a fan of you guys for a really long time. It's just like the whole, just the wave of feminism and just like politically correctness and like.
So you're not a feminist.
People only voting for Hillary because she's a woman and such like that. Like,
did you meet anyone who voted for Hillary only because she's a woman? I didn't meet anybody like that.
Yeah, and what you say is true there, but I don't think it was only. I probably, that was a poor choice of words from me.
So when you said you didn't like it when people voted for Hillary only because she was a woman, you actually didn't mean that. You don't know of anybody who voted for Hillary Clinton only because she's a woman.
And you're not a feminist.
Yeah, I missaid that. I'd say it's more of like something that I just see it such a like. I see people that really only like. For me, I've looked at so many different sides of media and such, and seen so many different opinions. But I feel like when people are only subjected to the like liberal independent news sources and like any major news sources, they're really only exposed to that, and then they might not actually think about the policy that much, but they might just see Hillary Clinton being this strong woman and such.
But no offense, you're saying yeah, sometimes people might not think about the policies that much. When we asked you why you voted for Trump, you said you were really sick of the political correctness and feminism stuff. That has nothing to do with the policies, right? So it sounds like you're sort of in the group of people you're criticizing for not voting based on policy.
Yeah, and you know what? Like, I know that I completely agree with you, and you,
all
you
right,
completely just demolished me. Like, no, like I do. Like, I mean, what you just said is correct, and this is exactly why I listen to you.
All right. Pat, I know Pat wants to talk to you real quick. Just real quick before you go. Pat wants to say something too.
So just in terms of being politically correct, is there a word or phrase you wish you could say now that is not considered politically correct for you to say at this point?
Wait, let me think about your question there. You just mean like a certain like.
So there's things you can't get away with saying now that you may have been able to decades prior.
Prior to political correctness.
Could you think of some sort of example of something you wish you could say now?
No, but you guys are ridiculously smart, and this is why I listen to you. And if I paid more attention, called before, I actually got to talk about my views. You guys, I may have voted differently.
Wow. Well, listen, in Pennsylvania,
I'm not even kidding on that.
One vote wouldn't have made a difference. So at least we can say that even though it sounds like nobody can figure out why you voted for Donald Trump, that one vote would not have changed the election results. And I think for that, you'll be able to sleep easy for the next 4 years.
Maybe.
Yeah, I mean,
oh, man.
I mean, what you like, literally the things though, being able to express my thought process during the election and such, and you guys debunking that in your very smart and formulated way right there, like that's honestly what I needed. I think I can look at politics almost in a whole different lens now.
Wow. Well, for that, we can thank Rachel and Pat. Listen, I really appreciate the call. We've got to run. This is endlessly fascinating, believe me, but it's also very, very confusing, and it explains to us a little bit about what did happen last night. Thanks so much for the call. I appreciate it.
Yeah, it was a great conversation. Thank you.
Pleasure speaking with
you.
You. Pleasure. Thank you. Okay, we definitely need a break after that, guys. I mean, that I think explains to us a lot about what happened on Tuesday night and early in the Wednesday hours. We will take a break. We will process, and then we will be back.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. Welcome back to the David Pakman Show.
I figure since we are past Election Day now on the classic interview this Friday, today, we will go back to just a good old-fashioned right-wing nut interview. And this is Stacey Campfield, the Tennessee state senator. This was a conversation we had. The incredibly anti-gay Stacey Campfield kicked out of a restaurant in Tennessee for being anti-gay. I know that this is a favorite of many in our audience. I know lots of our new viewers and listeners have never heard this, so we're going to play it for you. Let's revisit my interview with Stacey Campfield back from January of 2012. Tennessee State Senator Stacey Campfield, Republican from Knoxville, is back on the show. He made some news last week when he did an interview with SiriusXM's Michelangelo Signorile. Senator, you made a number of claims during that interview, including that it was virtually impossible to contract AIDS through heterosexual sex. You also said that homosexuality is dangerous. Tell me, what exactly is harmful about homosexuality? That maybe is a good place to start.
Sure. Well, the act of homosexuality, I mean, if you're talking about anal sex, is very, and I'm sorry if this is too graphic for some people, but it is very risky behavior. You have a very high rate of catching disease from it. Vaginal intercourse between a man and a woman, your odds are actually, and I've got links on my blog at www.lastcar.blogspot.com. I have links that say that the odds of someone actually catching AIDS from vaginal intercourse with just an average person, not a high-risk person, but an average person, are about 1 in 5 million. Now, obviously, if you're having sex with an IV drug user, homosexual, bisexuals, hemophiliacs, people who are from Africa, the continent of Africa, not Africans per se, but people actually from there, your odds are obviously going to go up. But actually, in America, your odds of catching it through heterosexual contact with non-high-risk people is about 1 in 5 million.
Yeah, it's interesting because you're saying something which is very common with a lot of I guess, anti-gay individuals, which is when you ask them what's bad about homosexuality, they obsess about two men having sex. And it's incredible to me because homosexuality is something that exists in, as I'm sure you know, thousands of animal species across, tens of millions of years, if you believe the Earth has been around that long. Why does the focus about homosexuality in a moral sense become about two men having sex? How can we take that and say homosexuality is immoral or harmful? I don't understand that. Why is the fixation on anal sex?
Well, obviously, like I said, because first of all, it's not a healthy lifestyle. It's very dangerous. The average homosexual, for a variety of reasons, has about a lifespan of about 24 years shorter than the average person.
Yeah, well, you got that from Paul Cameron, who's been widely discredited. That statistic has been widely discredited, and I mean, if you got it from somewhere other than Paul Cameron, let me know. But I looked into that, and that's just flatly not true.
There's statistics for insurance companies who do that sort of thing, and when they always try and discredit, they always say, "Well, what about older men in monogamous relationships?"
Yeah.
Well, I hate to say it, but most homosexual relationships, well, I shouldn't say most. Many homosexual relationships are not monogamous. They're much more prolific, I guess that's the word, with what they do in their life. In their
How do you know
life.
that?
Well, there's statistics on it. And actually, if you look at where you get a lot of this information, you can pull this information up. Look at insurance statistics. If you are a homosexual man, your insurance rates go through the roof, and the reason is because you have so much shorter lifespan.
Which insurance rates? Health insurance?
Life insurance. They're called, I believe it's not annuity rates, but they're. And by the way, you mentioned some other things about it's been the animal kingdom forever and ever.
Yeah.
I tend to disagree with that. I've never seen, and again, I hate to use graphic language.
Sure.
But I've never seen or known of an animal sodomizing another animal.
So let me see if I understand. What you're saying is that the idea that homosexuality has existed in a percentage of thousands of species over the history of time, to you it doesn't strike you as true because you've never seen two animals having anal sex. Do I understand that correctly, sir?
I haven't seen that. I can't attest for it, but I just said I've never seen it.
You've never seen two animals having sex, therefore there is not homosexuality in the animal kingdom. But I don't want to misstate you.
Not that I've seen. I know animals, they sort of, I hate to say fake it, I guess, whatever, to show dominance over one another. But I've never actually seen one animal sodomize another animal, no.
So in other words, the homosexual activity you've observed in animals seems to be almost like an S&M dominance type of thing, but is not evidence to you of actual homosexuality in any other species other than humans. Is that right?
I can't speak for what an animal's thinking in their head or in their heart, no.
Well, you just said you see it as a dominance thing. That implies you know the intent, doesn't it? How would you know it's dominance?
Well, that's what most people have said, that there's more of a show of dominance when they do that. They're showing dominance over another animal.
Who's most people?
Well, if you want to get online, I guess you can look that up. So
you've called anti-gay bullying a lark. What did you mean by that?
We already have it. Homosexuals are covered by anti-bullying laws, or our anti-bullying laws already. So to say that we need new bullying laws, and we need to have special groups come in to talk to children about homosexuality because of bullying, is not really true.
So your concern is what? That somebody would come into schools and tell children what? That homosexuality exists, that it's okay, and what's your concern in the what's the nitty-gritty of the concern?
I just don't think that's an issue we need to be talking about, the principles of it. I don't believe that's something we need to be talking about in our schools. Our schools in Tennessee were ranked about 46th in the nation, in a nation that is slipping from, we used to be at the top of the world.
Right.
Really now we're slipping down. We're not studying, we're not even passing math, science, a lot of our major things. We're having problems getting through that, and yet we decide or some people would really like for teachers to go out there and start saying, well, let's talk to you about the complex life of homosexuals or sexuality.
Well,
and
it's interesting you mentioned that.
Even though there may not be, teachers are not psychologists, they're not psychiatrists, they are not, I don't think they're someone who knows when every child in the classroom may be prepared to hear about these issues. I just don't think that's appropriate for very young children.
So should they also not talk about heterosexual marriages? Maybe that's not something children are prepared to hear about. If they are not psychologists, who are they to say, well, we've determined they can hear about heterosexual marriages, but not homosexual marriages? It seems very arbitrary, Senator.
Well, actually, we don't teach that. Actually, and my bill would take care of that, because my bill, all it talks about is natural reproduction.
What's your reaction to our home state of Massachusetts here, which was the first to legalize gay marriage and has very strong anti-bullying and other anti-discrimination legislation related to homosexuality? We're doing incredibly well education-wise. What's going on?
I don't think the two are connected. I really don't. I think, you may be doing great with education. There may be other factors there that, hey, maybe Tennessee wants to model. But is it homosexuality that's something we have to, education on homosexuality, does that somehow make your educational system better? I haven't seen any proof of that. Like I said, we passed some great legislation talking about bullying. I don't think anybody should be bullied, no matter what lifestyle they have. Fat kids get bullied, skinny kids get bullied, small kids get bullied.
And when you say lifestyle, you mean that somebody just chooses to be homosexual. When you say lifestyle, you mean someone chooses to live a homosexual lifestyle, is that right?
Excuse me?
When you say lifestyle, am I right to hear that you're saying somebody who is homosexual has chosen that lifestyle?
Well, I mean, I don't. The activity, I think, is a choice. We are human beings, so we have choice over what we do with ourselves. So, say someone chooses to have sex, or I'd say that's pretty much about right.
Okay. Hey, last thing. I know you have to go because you have another interview coming. Is it true yesterday you were kicked out of the bistro at the Bijou on Gay Street by owner Martha Boggs because she didn't like your anti-gay stances? Is that true?
Well, yeah, it is true. She asked me to leave.
Yeah.
It's unfortunate that some people, we can't sit down and talk about issues. That it's always funny. I always say liberals are the most open-minded people to different points of view until someone actually has a different point of view, and then they sort of freak out and don't know how to handle people with different points of view.
So, in a sense, we might say you were unfairly discriminated against. Would you say that?
Well, some people have said that my civil rights were violated if I were to base it on my religious beliefs. Based my views on my religious beliefs, that I would be covered by the 1964 Civil Rights Act, but I haven't really said that.
Right, but so maybe I guess you're getting a sense for how homosexuals feel.
What?
I guess you're getting a little bit of a sense for how homosexual people feel when they're discriminated against. Maybe, Senator?
Well, I'll be honest with you. I would not frequent a place that said we're not going to serve homosexuals at a restaurant. I wouldn't go there.
Okay.
No, I would not. If someone said, hey, I'm not going to serve homosexuals, I don't think we should be discriminating based on that. I don't think that's a valid reason.
Senator, I think that's the best thing. That's the one thing we agree on the most from this interview. Tennessee State Senator Stacey Cantfield, Republican from Knoxville. I will let you go. I know you have that other interview going. Thank you so much for joining us.
No problem. Take care.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com. The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.
Let's answer a few questions. First one today is from Mila. Mila says, what's the closest you came to dying that you are aware of? Yeah, I mean, I think that you are aware of is a good caveat because, I don't know. There were probably situations where maybe on a plane, there was a situation where I never even found out that there was some kind of a issue up front. And it was closer to a plane crash than anybody ever knew. I don't really know. I mean, my guess is if there was almost a plane crash, I would have noticed something from sitting on the plane, but maybe not. I don't know.
And plane crashes are very unlikely, but have you ever been into a car accident of some sort?
I've been rear-ended. I've not been in an accident where I thought, if I was a foot to the left or a foot to the right, I could have died. What I have experienced many times, though, are sort of near misses in cars where there's someone who is not paying attention and at the very last moment, one or both of the drivers sort of make an erratic move with the car and you avoid an accident altogether. It's hard to imagine that it would have been nothing or death, right? More likely it would have been nothing or an accident where you might have been somewhat injured. There's this one thing I remember where I was, I think, about 10 years old, and I was riding my bicycle on a bike path in Western Massachusetts. And I remember my dad was riding sort of ahead of me. And I sort of drifted. You're supposed to stay to the right, much like on roads in the United States. And I sort of started drifting over to the left, and I was looking into the woods or something like that. And then like a big time, like a big biker, like an athletic biker that bikes fast came by, and he came so close to me that his shirt sort of rubbed against me. I mean, that's how close we were. Now, had we hit head on, could I have died? I don't know. I guess it's relatively unlikely. A bike head-on collision, it's unlikely that it would kill you, but it was pretty scary.
Right. I mean, biking in cities, it's looked at as the more healthy green option.
Yeah.
But I mean, I used to do the same thing in Washington, D.C., and my concern was always that I was going to get car doored.
Yeah.
That someone, while I was going through the bike lane, would all of a sudden open their car door and I'd be go flying and maybe even into traffic.
Yeah.
So that is a concern.
There's another approach to this, which is if you consider the conditions that prior to vaccines and antibiotics people used to die from. I used to have sinus infections, bacterial sinus infections, pretty frequently when I was like 18 to 24. It's very mathematically possible that if we did not have antibiotics at this point, that one of those would have spread and potentially could have killed me prior to the antibiotic age. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the child mortality rate was far higher than it is now, and of course, life expectancy is going up. The story that I would share is that when I was, this was a few years ago, the Boston Marathon attacks, I was walking from my job near Fenway Park to my dormitory in the downtown area of Boston. And because of the marathon, there's a lot of chaos, and I didn't want to take the train home, so I decided to walk the whole way.
Right.
And so I would see the end of the finish line. I walked by the finish line at the race time where it was like 3 hours and 50 minutes. And I learned later that the bombs went off at 4:09.
Right.
So, you know, I don't want to say this as if I was in any sort of imminent danger, because only a few people actually passed away from this. But it was certainly scary looking back at it.
You were very close time-wise and location-wise to where people that were not doing anything other than just at the race were killed because of where they were and the time that the explosion happened. So in that sense, you were certainly in a situation where people did die doing nothing different than what you were doing, just walking through. I think that's the point.
Absolutely, yeah. And a lot of people were coming from the Fenway area. The Red Sox game that they have on Patriots Day is during that morning. And a lot of people that were injured or just observed the whole chaos were coming right from the game.
Yeah, and Patriots Day, for people who don't know, it's a Massachusetts only holiday, right?
Only, yes.
It's the first, or it's the second Monday in April or something like that. It's early in April, yeah. Next question today is from Aaron. Aaron says, regarding the documentary Poverty, Inc., I realize that they don't address medical assistance to these countries. What's your opinion on missionary doctors? How useful are organizations such as Doctors Without Borders? Is providing free health care to countries with a need of this service eventually detrimental to the very same countries? Yeah, so background. I recommended the film Poverty, Inc., and what Poverty, Inc. exposes is that many times a lot of the efforts you see from companies and NGOs to help other countries in the long term may not be that useful. And an example was, not to pick on them, but Tom's Footwear donates a pair of shoes to a poor country for every pair that is sold or something like that. And the argument is, listen, it's great that people who don't have shoes are getting some shoes. But when you're just donating shoes on an every once in a while basis to these countries, you're really not allowing, you're actually preventing the local shoemaking industry from flourishing. And if you take a step back, are countries going to get out of poverty if some other company from another country sends shoes for the people there? Or are they going to do a better job of trying to raise themselves out of poverty if they develop a supply and demand economy internally where shoes are both being purchased and people can afford buying shoes? That's a sort of big picture argument. The question from Aaron is, okay, given that we understand that, what about medical assistance in countries like Doctors Without Borders, et cetera? I think it's a little different, because I think that, of course, it would be far more desirable for countries to be able to advance and develop and sustain their own systems of medicine and being able to treat disease, prevent disease, and administer medicine on their own. However, there is a more long-term benefit to coming in and bringing in Doctors Without Borders or medical care or vaccines or whatever, insofar as if you're saving people from death, from preventable disease by sending vaccines from another country, for example, you now have a much larger population base that can innovate and can work and can purchase, et cetera, et cetera. So missionary doctors, I did disagree with in principle, because you're sort of manipulating people and you're saying, hey, we're here to save you. And by the way, we're really here. It's not actually just the vaccines or the treatment or the technology we bring, but it's also Jesus or, Mormonism or whatever the case may be. So I don't like the idea of missionary doctors. To the extent that any doctors are willing to go and provide medical services, I think that's a good thing. But from a sort of a cultural perspective, I don't like the whole missionary doctor thing. I'll give you a vaccine and tell you about Jesus Christ. Darius wrote to me and said, what's your opinion about honking the horn in a car, especially in traffic jams or other situations? Do you do it, and how do you react to other people doing it? I barely ever use my horn, and I think it's completely counterproductive. I don't get why people are using their horn, particularly in a traffic jam. Where is anybody going to go? I've been in many situations, even on highways, Pat, where it's just a traffic jam, right? There's no decisions to be made. There's nothing to do whatsoever. And all of a sudden, people are honking, and not necessarily even at me, but like the person next to me is honking, or people up front or further behind. I don't get the point of it. And I incredibly rarely use my horn. I will do it if someone, and here in Boston, there's a lot of really bad driving. If someone is doing something insanely dangerous, like as I'm driving straight ahead in my lane, someone with no signal starts to sort of drift over, I will do a sustained horn honk there. And usually that will get them to go back into their lane. And I'm very specifically trying to avoid an accident, right? But the sort of honking to complain about, things that are barely even a blip on the radar, I try to restrict my horn honking.
Well, you're very polite, it seems, as a driver.
Yeah.
I think just growing up in the Boston area, I have kind of taken over the idea that you have to beep for any small infraction that someone else commits.
Really?
But I have this idea that there really should be two different kinds of horns. One should be in case a near accident is going to happen and you have to warn the other driver.
Like the normal horn.
Right, and maybe another friendly one to say, oh, the light has turned green, you should start going now, or to say hi to your friends. I mean, I think we need two different ones.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, the problem is every car already has a different sounding horn, so then you'd be talking about, twice as many iterations. I did have not a rude awakening, but I was reacquainted with the use of the horn when I was driving during my trip to Italy in September, because there, with all of the motorcycles and scooters that are constantly diving in and out and in between cars, their horns are actually used very regularly, sort of as like a, hey, I'm here type of message. Like, just so you know, I'm here, because people are constantly weaving. And in the Amalfi Coast, the roads are so narrow and windy that often you can't actually see around the curve. And the horn is also used to warn people, because sometimes you would drive not right off to the side, but you would drift sort of to the middle of the road a little bit because it is so narrow. And when you're coming around these curves, you use your horn just to let oncoming traffic know that you're there. At first, it was very distracting because there's constant horn honking, but it's a totally different application there.
Yeah, and for the most part, that's covered here by flashing lights, right?
Yeah.
A lot of people, if they're warning someone about something about in the road that's going on,
right,
something that they have to pay attention to, they'll just flash their lights really quick. And I do that all the time.
I have one friend who drives with one hand on the horn because he believes that driving is sort of like dog training, where if you don't provide the feedback immediately, the same way the dog doesn't realize what it's being scolded for unless you scold it immediately, the driver won't connect whatever action they did to being scolded by the horn. So he drives with one hand on the wheel at about 10 o'clock and another hand right on the horn to be able to instantly honk at other cars. I don't know that he's really doing God's work, so to speak, in informing people and improving their driving. I think people have no idea what he's doing, but this is his tactic anyway.
And I'm sure he's a perfect driver, never makes a mistake, and never has to hear the warning himself.
Reports are that he's quite a good driver.
That's good to know.
All right, we have a great bonus show for you today. We're so out of time, I won't even tell you what's on it, but what I will tell you is 2017 David Pakman Show calendars are available at davidpakman.com/calendar17. And if you want the calendar for free, you can also get it with a yearly membership.
The David Pakman Show at davidpakman.com.